Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nicholas, and I'll have the pleasure to talk to you about the relationship of trust and decision-making. And the main question I want to ask is one that concerns us all in our lives: is how much can we trust the decisions we make? Yeah. And the reason why I thought to talk about trust and decision is because decisions are clearly important in our life. Our life is the sum of the decisions we make. Some decisions happen very easily, right? If I ask you what is 2 plus 2, you'll tell 4. Yeah. Some decisions are more difficult to make, right? Some decisions can be extremely stressful and not allow us to sleep at night because we might know they might impact our life, right? So these decisions could be, should I marry this person? Should I propose tomorrow? These questions could be, do I accept this job? What will I study? Should I go and live abroad, etc., etc. So if our life is the sum of our decisions, well, it's pretty important to think about decisions and how that works, right? And so to start with, I'd like to tell us a bit about myself and where my interest for decision-making comes from. And then I'd like to go into understanding the decision-making process. And what I'd like to do is understand the mind. How does our mind work? How do decisions happen? Because if we understand our mind and the decision-making processes that occur, then we'll probably be able to make better decisions, perhaps. And the main argument I want to run today with you, and I hope to get you excited about this topic, as excited as I am, is that in the way our mind is built, there are some forms of systematic errors in judgment and choice that can happen. If we understand these systematic errors that can happen, well, we'll be able to make better decisions. That is the thesis of my talk today, and I'd like to guide you through it and hope to get you excited about it. Because one last thing on that, I believe that thinking about the mind and how it works can provide us a deeper understanding of the mind and a vocabulary which will allow us to better understand and analyze decisions we make or decisions our family members and colleagues make, and therefore be better at recognizing some systematic errors in the decisions, and therefore have more trust in our own decisions, right? So to start with, I'd like to tell where my interest for trust comes, and for trust and decision-making comes. And I would say it is linked to my work. So I'm an entrepreneur and sociologist, and 4 years ago, I created a company called Transparency at Work, as you see here, the logo. And what we do is we want to help young professionals make better decisions to kickstart their career, and we do so by providing employer reviews. So the idea here is that young people, like I see many of you out here, when you want to make a decision to see a company where to work with, you'd always have the question, well, can I trust this company? Will this be a good company to work with? Will I have a great career? Will I have cool colleagues? Will I be happy here? Will I be earning? So a lot of questions, and the necessity to judge with a limited amount of information. So trust in your decision is very important, and our idea is to create employer reviews to enhance the trust, because you know more. Right? So that is the interest related to the work that I do. And the other interest for trust and decision making comes from the role I take in this company. So I've created this company together with 2 colleagues, and what we do, so in a sense I'm the CEO with the 2 others, and we have to make every day lots of decisions, right? And since we have a strong leverage, as we are the heads of the company, these decisions can be extremely good or extremely detrimental, right? So we would need to decide who to hire. We would need to decide what kind of products to develop, which markets to enter. We'd need to decide whether to build a website, how much money to spend for this website, etc. So while doing this, and while discussing at night or during daytime with my colleagues, and while making these decisions, I always had a certain feeling of unease. Not always, but often. Feeling that, are the decisions we're doing right? Aren't we being here too optimistic that this new application would only cost us $5,000 and take 3 months? Yeah, wouldn't this take longer? Or the person we're hiring, are we hiring this person because he's good looking, he's charming, and he's nice? Or are we hiring him because he's a real fit for our company, right? We created a company thinking within 1 year we'd be the masters of the world. Yeah, now 4 years later we're still working on it, right? So it took much longer. So while thinking about that and while making decisions, I always had this feeling of unease of, there's something not quite right in the process of how we make decisions, but I could never put it in words. And this might be a feeling that you might have as well, right? What's happening while we're doing decisions. So what I did is I went reading, I looked at behavioral economics, I looked at psychology, to try and understand what answers can we find from the sciences and how can they be useful for business. And this is what I'd like to guide you through right now in the next step. So let's look at how our mind works, yeah? What does research teach us on that? And research teaches us, well, so that we have two systems in our mind. We have two modes of thinking which apply in very different circumstances, yeah? And to put it simple, we can call one the fast thinking and one the slow thinking, yeah? So I took a squirrel to represent the fast thinking because in front of my new flat there's a squirrel running around, fetching stuff, being very quick, etc. And there's a part of our minds which is very quick, right? To judge and to recognize situations. So when I ask you what is 3 + 2, you know the answer is 5. When you hear your partner on the phone, you can recognize if he's aggressive, if he's angry, if she's tired. That is things you can hear. When you drive a car and all of a sudden you see an animal on the street, you would turn around to save yourself, right? You wouldn't be thinking that, probably I should move. It's an automatic reaction, very often unconscious. And this is a fast mode of thinking, which helps us in life because it allows us to judge and decide very quickly. And we often are under time pressure, and we need to discuss, and we need to decide. So this is the fast thinking, right? But there's a second element, and that is the slow thinking, which I represent by an owl, right? So Athens is a city of wisdom, or used to be, and owls were the symbol of Athens, the symbol of wisdom. And so System 2 represents our rationality, our concentrated mind, our deliberate mind. This is by which we associate, right? We associate as human beings with the capacity to reflect, to think, to ponder, to understand, to analyze. Science is based on that, yeah, and in large parts business as well. In fact, in the economies, we've had a lot of, we've had the rational choice theory for a long time being dominant, saying that individuals are rational agents trying to maximize their interests, and they're rational. But are they really so rational? Are our decisions always prone to maximize our interests? Would they always be good? Well, the argument of behavioral economics, which I want to stress here, is no. Somehow there are situations in life where the decisions we make are not the best. Yeah? But before looking into that, I would like to call these systems System 1 and System 2 for the simplicity, because they're two different systems. And I'd like to go more in detail of how they work, right? So System 1 is the intuitive and automatic thing, oftentimes unconscious, right? It's when we meet somebody at a party, and this person might be a lady, yeah, with lipstick, with here some jewelry, with colors here, long hair, makeup here, everything there. We immediately form an image, right? Is this person smart looking? Is this person interesting? Is this person approachable? Would we like to spend more time with this person? These are decisions we always make, and thank God we make them because they allow us to guide ourselves in life. So this is the System 1, the fast and automatic system, and can be quite pleasurable to work with that because it costs little energy. On the other hand, we have System 2, right? This is Gary Kasparov playing against Deep Blue. I think a computer. I think he lost that match. And you see, I took this picture because it's very nice. It shows the effort, the sweat, the tiredness that can come up with thinking and reasoning, etc. And the point that the theory makes, I want to present here, is that we need both systems to operate, to function well in life. Yeah? And these systems, they have different roles, they have different responsibilities. System 1, yeah, which is the intuitive automatic system, is a system that provides us the intuition, the first impressions when we meet someone and like someone for the first time. It's the likes and dislikes that we have without even realizing we had a single thought on that. Yeah? And System 2 has the role to control these likes and dislikes. Yeah? To check, okay, I like this programmer. Yeah. So does it make sense to hire him? Well, let me make some checks. Let me talk with him more in detail. Let me check out for some recommendations. Let me see his work, etc. So this is System 2, which is there to analyze and check. Yeah. So all this sounds pretty good, but what's the problem then? Yeah. Well, this is the theory, but in practice there are some problems. In practice, the problem is that very often we have the necessity to act very fast, intuitively, and very often we just do not apply System 2 for various reasons which are linked with the cognitive build-up of our minds. Yeah, and these are mainly because sometimes we have time pressure, sometimes we're tired, Sometimes we're hungry, so we just don't feel like thinking a lot. Yeah. And in my presentation, I would like to show you some examples of how this happens and how system 2, the thinking and deliberation, might be turned off for various reasons. Yeah. But let's look at system 1 a bit more in detail. So the point I want to stress is that very often the decisions we make, or not very often, but often enough, the decisions we make can be wrong and can be biased. Yeah? And this is somehow based on the way world functions and our mind functions, right? So every time we need to do a decision, yeah, so let's say a decision, do I go to this doctor or not, right? We would need to ask a question, which is, should I go to this doctor? Is this doctor good? So let's imagine you went to the doctor and you had a first conversation with him or her to cure your illness that you might have. Then you'd be going home and your partner might ask you, so, how was the doctor, right? And does it make sense to get a treatment from him or her? Well, then you have a judgment which comes in and which says yes or no, yeah? So what we do while answering these questions is we have what we call heuristics, yeah? Now, heuristics are mental shortcuts that allow people to solve problems and make judgments quickly and efficiently. Yeah? So if you go back here to the question of the doctor, how should you be able to say if a doctor is really good? Yeah? First of all, you have no idea about medicine. Yeah? Secondly, you might have had only 5 minutes to talk with this doctor and introduce a problem. Thirdly, you really don't know how to judge, right? So you need a kind of a heuristic, something that allows you to judge, although you don't have all the information. And there are different heuristics we might have, right? Different tricks by which we judge. So one judges, okay, do I follow my gut feelings? Did I have a good feeling with this doctor? Yeah? Did I like this doctor? Was he charming? Did she listen to me? Yeah? So these are, was the doctor recommended by a friend? Yeah? So these are heuristics that we use and that can be extremely helpful. But what we need to remember when doing these feelings is that we can actually, when doing these heuristics, that we can actually be wrong, yeah, because it's an estimated guess in a situation of uncertainty because we didn't have sufficient information, right? So this is something which is problematic in a sense, can lead to problematic decisions because we take heuristics as an important tool for decision making, but still it's an estimation, approximation, and we should always realize that. That's the one point. And so another point for the question of why we have cognitive errors in the decisions we make and in the judgments we do is a system 2, which is our rationality, our thinking mind is lazy. You can imagine like a 200-kilo fat person who just doesn't like to move, right? And our brain is a bit like this because we really don't like effort. Yeah? When we see we don't like effort is when we hear somebody presenting to us an idea which is so complex that we start yawning and say, okay, I need to go to the toilet if it's at a party, right? So system 2 is lazy. And what I'd like to do with you now is I'd like to show you an example, and I would like you to, as a question, and I would like you to answer for yourself the question without thinking, your first reaction. Yeah? And I'll ask you what you think the answer is. So the question is, are you all with me? Yeah, cool. So a bat and a ball cost €1.10. Yeah. The bat costs €1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Okay, what's the answers? 10 cents. Yeah, 10 cents. Any other answers? 5 cents. So who's for 10 cents? Hands up. Okay. Who's for 5 cents? And the other ones? Critical mind still thinking. Okay. Thank you for playing along. So the right answer is unfortunately 5 cents. Yeah. Now the interesting thing about this example is that it shows the two different minds that are at work. The first mind is the intuitive mind, right? Is 10 cents. Yeah. Thank you so much for saying 10 cents. It helped me make my point. And so 10 cents. You see 1 10. So one that would make sense. That is the intuitive answer, right? And but the correct answer is that the young lady said that behind 5 cents, because only if it's 5 cents, then the bet costs €1 more than the ball. So the point here is that to show that system 1 is lazy. Now research from psychologists have shown that they have done this exercise with the best students, yeah, from Harvard, Yale, and other universities, and more than 50% gave the wrong answer there, right? So this is not to say that people are not very intelligent at Yale or Harvard, while they could be not very intelligent, but that's not what I want to judge here. It is to say that our minds are lazy, we don't like to think, and there's always an intuitive answer coming up. So how do we make sure that we're not going with the wrong intuitive answer, but we actually take the right answer, right? So system one is laziness to remember. For the later examples, I will show you. The second example is system two is easily depleted. Yeah, like the Garry Kasparov example. We play chess and we might be tired, or the lady there doing the simultaneous translations. That is system two. That might be quite tiring, and I'm quite impressed about her ability to translate so much in so much time. So there is something about the system two which makes us tired, and this can have very severe consequences. Because what this means is that we might often be in situations where we need to make important decisions, but we just might be tired, right? You have these things, if you follow politics, negotiation rounds in the EU, they've been talking for hours and hours, and at night they come up with a decision at 3 a.m. Well, I wonder if that would be a good decision, right? And there's research showing that this can have extremely serious consequences for the lives of people, right? So does anyone recognize the movie scene here? Yes? You recognize it? It's from the movie 12 Angry Men. Yeah? And it's a criticism of American judicial system. And what it does is it criticizes the way judges make their decisions, right? And so it actually makes sense for our presentation. And what Mr. Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner who wrote a book on behavioral economics, what he says is that he mentions an example of judges in Israel. Yeah? And these judges were parole judges. So what that means is these judges were supposed to, they received every day requests for pardoning. So people who were in prison, who are asking to be pardoned and to leave prison earlier. Yeah? And the default mode of these judges was negation. So 65% of, let's say, more than 0.5% of the requests were not accepted. Yeah? Now the interesting thing of the study was to see that researchers went and analyzed their paroling behavior. Yeah? They analyzed what times of the day are they more generous and say, okay, you'll be free, and what times of the day are they more strict, say, no, you're not free. And the craziest thing actually, which was striking and made huge waves, was that there were certain moments of the day when when the judges were more forgiving, in a sense that they would grant permission to exit the jail earlier. What do you think? Fantastic. Yes, it's after lunch. After lunch, right? Why is that? They're happy, satisfied. They're happy, life's good, others should feel good as well. Well, it's not that bad, but in a sense that after lunch, actually, what happened is that people have energy again. They're fresher again. So they can do the strenuous, difficult, mind-breaking work of thinking, of analyzing the situation. Whereas when we're tired, we say, okay, anything goes. Yes, so there are certain times of the day, right? In the morning, fresh and good. After breakfast. So, I mean, they're not that generous. Right, so the point is that there are certain times of the day, yeah, where they are more willing to do the work of reflecting, yeah, and deviating from the general approach, which is saying, no, you cannot be, because that is the majority. And so what that shows is, again, that mental effort is a lot of work, and we try to avoid it. At the same, it gets depleted. And at the same time, there are situations in life where this can have severe consequences. So it's not a good idea to make important decisions when we're depleted. That's one point. A third point, which I found fascinating, is that cognitive ease feels true. Yeah? Now, what does that mean? That means that when we are at ease, when information is easy to understand, when things sound familiar, when things are evident, yeah, they feel more true, they feel good, yeah. And I think this is a very interesting point, yeah. It says when I understand things, things feel more true, right? And so there's different examples. Imagine I was a speaker, and I was to tell you I have a presentation on consequences of rigid vernacular utilized irrespective of necessity. Yeah? What would you be thinking? Fuck that. Fuck that. Fuck that. Time for a coffee. Yeah. So you'd be thinking, fuck that. You'd be thinking, who is this guy anyway? Yeah. Why is he supposed to tell me? Why am I supposed to listen if he can't even put a phrase normally? Yeah. The same thing actually could mean problems with using long words needlessly. Yeah. It's the same meaning. Yeah. But the point I want to stress here is that when things are complicated or difficult to understand, then we get suspicious. Yeah? We start thinking. We say, what? In fact, those of you who have children, yeah, and when children lie because they discover the power of lies, yeah, I think some of them figure out the real power of good lying, which is making things sound very simple. As soon as the parents would be, sorry, what do you mean? Can you explain that? Then they go into the thinking, and then they become critical. So what happens is, when we use difficult language, when things are complex, people tend to awaken system 2 and start thinking and reflecting and say, wait a minute, explain this to me please better, yeah? So the consequences this has is that when holding a presentation, be as simple as possible, because then the presentation might make you feel easy, and it might feel good as well, yeah? There are other studies which were striking, that things that feel familiar feel more true and feel better because they feel good. So what they did is they did a study in America, where they placed in the student journal, on the first page, they placed random Turkish words. Yeah. Now I don't speak Turkish, but they might have placed ukeli, drükli, sikli. Yeah. I hope there's not any Turks here. And so anyway, they were placing random Turkish words. Some words they were placing frequently, yeah, over a course of a few weeks and months, and some words just once or twice. Now, what they did is they did a study and asking readers of this magazine to rate how good these words sounded, if they were relating to things which were good or things which were not so good. Yeah, what is the emotional response to this word? And of course, then the result was striking. Was saying the words which were more frequent were aroused a better, more positive connotation. And the psychologist was saying, well, yeah, of course that makes sense, because evolutionary things that we see more frequently and we're used to without being aggressed or attacked feel familiar, and so we can be safe about that, right? So this is another thing, another situation where our brains, our system 2, can be switched off. When we feel easy, we don't think. Yeah. When we're in a good mood, we're less critical. So it might be a moment where it's more dangerous to make decisions which might not be that good. Okay, so we're here. So you could say, well, what's the problem about all this? Why should I bother? Why should I even be interested in thinking about system 1, system 2? Why should I spend time on all this? Well, the reason is that we have cognitive biases everywhere. Yeah? And what is a cognitive bias? A cognitive bias is a judgment which does not reflect reality. Is a judgment which is wrong, right? And what I'd like to do now with you is to show you a few cognitive biases and hope that you might recognize some of them in your own lives. Yeah. So first question, which line is longer? Equal. So smart. Yes, so this is equal, but the interesting thing is that the first time one might see at that, yeah, the top line might seem longer, right? And why is that? Because there are illusions, visual illusions under which we might suffer, right? But at the same time, we don't only have visual illusions, there's something I would call cognitive illusion, yeah? The illusion that we understand something, that we make the right judgment, but it's wrong. And this is system 1, which might generate these illusions very frequently. Let's look at an example. So the parents among you might know that, yeah, or the children of parents, of course, as well. So there's a situation of 2 rabbits, yeah, mother rabbit and baby rabbit, and they have a fight because baby rabbit breaks the vase that where is this? That mother rabbit loves a lot, actually, and she sees the broken vase and she goes, "Hey, you know better than to fool around with your mom's expensive vase. Get to your room." Yeah. Why did you fool around with it? Why did you use that as it was a Lego toy or whatever, right? And the kid actually, in this beautiful story, because it's true and it's sad at the same time as well, actually had the intention to be nice to the mother, to make her a gift, to please the mother. But what baby rabbit achieved was quite the opposite. Now what happened here is that the mother jumped to conclusion based on what she saw. Yeah? And this is, again, system 1 acting. And system 1 giving you an impression, and system 2 perhaps not controlling and saying, wait a minute, are we sure that my child was fooling around with that? Should I first ask what happened before I shout? Yeah, and we often, I'm sure we all had these situations where we jump to a conclusion and we say, oh my God. Yeah. Another example is, now this is, I come from Italy and this is very frequent there. On a highway, you have 2 normal lanes, yeah, and you have traffic often, and so what you have is on the right lanes, every now and then you have people just overtaking, which is the security lane, right? And I've often had a situation where people will be, my God, look at the Italian society, it's developing extremely badly, yeah? But well, who tells you actually that the person might not have a sick child in the need to go to hospital there, right? So again, we jump on a conclusion based on experience, and this can be a great thing to do, right? Because we need to jump to conclusions quickly, but this necessity can be flawed because it's not natural science, yeah? It's a leap of faith. It's an estimation we do. So this is one element. And the other thing is we are often not aware that we're jumping to conclusions. So may I ask someone to read out what he or she sees here, but not a smart one, someone who just sees this experiment for the first time. What do you read? ABC? ABC? A13C? How do you see that? So, okay, we'll look at it in a second. Anne approached the bank. What does that mean? What does Anne do? What kind of bank? River of money. There you go. Yeah, river of money. Oh, damn it. River of money. What do you see here on the right? 12, 13, 14. Yeah. Or Charles will probably see 12, B, and 14. Yeah. And on the left you can see ABC, or you can see 113C. Anne approached the bank. If you are a business person, you might probably think, well, she went to the bank to withdraw money. If you are an ecologist, yeah, you might think Anne approached the riverbank. Yeah. So the point I want to make here is we jump to conclusions without even noticing that. Yeah. So ABC or A13C, many of us, I didn't see that the first time, right? Now what does this mean? That means that our mind has a tendency to come up with coherent stories about how to interpret reality, and these stories, they are based on the experiences we have. They might be based on prejudices we have, yeah? So when we live in racist societies, for instance, yeah, where people of certain background are treated badly and are imbued with negative prejudice, that is the context of interpretation of behavior. So if you find a situation where you have in a racist society where you have a black and a white person being accused to steal, your system 1 might be, probably was the black person, right? That's intuition that it gives you, like here you got an intuition, and it would be your system 2 who would need to reflect that. And when it does so, great, but very often that is not the case. And the point I want to make here is that jumping to a conclusion, which is a very natural thing to do, and thank God we do so, can have a high social cost, yeah? Because what are the synonyms of jumping to conclusions? Well, it's prejudice. It's assumptions, yeah. It is forejudging. It is presupposing. Well, as long as we know that we are presupposing and that we are assuming that our child was fooling around with the vase, as long as we know we're assuming, then we could question why did the vase break? What happened? Yeah. But very often what happens is we do not assume because we judge to conclusion, and this can lead to a fair amount of conflict, right? Second point, one of my favorite points, is the halo effect. Yeah, halo is, you know, what angels would have around their heads, representing grace and dignity. Yeah, if you will. Now, the halo effect is another form of cognitive bias, and this cognitive bias is quite tricky. But what it means is that we tend again to build coherent stories, yeah, based on the first informations that we have. And so that the first impressions that we make are crucial, because the first impressions will lead us can lead us to generate a favorable impression of the entire person, and then to extrapolate, to make conclusions of how this person would be. Yeah. So if there are any recruiters among you, You might know this because in recruitment, halo effect is quite an important element, yeah, to work for me, yeah. But there's a lot of information that is, again, jumping to a conclusion, that is an assumption. I don't have a guarantee there. Oftentimes, it might be right that a charming person or that a person it's fun to work with is good to work with as well. But again, it's an assumption, and that's not certain, right? So that's one point. The third point I want to talk is about the context in which things happen, which is linked to the halo effect, right? So imagine we have a gentleman in his, how might he be, in his mid-20s, late 20s, who is Alan, yeah? And imagine Alan is described to you as a person that is intelligent, industrious, impulsive, critical, stubborn, and envious, yeah? And if you were asked how good of a leader would Alan be, what would you think? What would your first guess be? From 1 to 10? 4. Who would say 7? All right, a few more. Okay. Well, now let's think that Alan was not Alan, but Alan was Ben. Yeah, his twin brother. And Ben was described to you as envious, stubborn, critical, impulsive, industrious, intelligent. Right? How would you assess the leadership potential of his twin brother Ben? Would it still be 4? Would it still be 7? Or would it change? Right? And so, as you probably notice, it's the same words that have been used here, just in a different order. Yeah? But experiments have shown the power of this. So the power of the halo effect. So if positive words come first, we as system 1 we like to build a coherent story. Yeah. So if Ben is intelligent, well then critical is a good thing, right? Because that's maybe why he is intelligent, and he is stubborn because he's intelligent, so he knows better what to do, right? Whereas if his twin brother would be described as envious, stubborn, and then only end at the end as intelligent, yeah. Well, that might change very much the view of this person. Now, what does this mean for us? This means that to be careful about our first impressions and about how we use our first impressions to draw coherent stories about other people. Yeah, and there's some of you might be professors or teachers might know this. Yeah, let's say like I had a teacher in school. He would always give me the same mark. Yeah, it was a German teacher, regardless of what I did. Yeah, so I felt he probably didn't even look at the end at my marks. Yeah, and since they were fairly good, I said that's fine enough for me. But if you, Kahneman was talking about this example of him having to correct 2 essays for the students throughout the semester, yeah? And what he noticed then was that if the first essay was good or was excellent, and the second essay was mediocre, well then he would give the student the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, so okay, this, I don't get it, well, it might have been pretty smart, or he might have had a bad day. So there's a tendency to try and have again a coherent story and to give a better mark. Whereas when he actually anonymously voted the different essays, he realized that there were different grades that he was giving. So this is an interesting thing to think about in your own everyday life, right? About how you treat people and how the first impressions you might have influence the way you treat him. Now another heuristic, that is one very popular in my family, is the availability heuristic. Yeah, how my parents often had this fight is my father being German, my mother being Indian. How can we let our children play around on the streets? So my mom would go, "Are you crazy? You know all the crime that's happening in Rome, all the children being kidnapped, and in India it's even worse. So I'm sure it's similar in Italy." My father, as a good old German, saying, "No, my children need to be free. They need to take risk. The probability of them being kidnapped is not very high." And I have 3 kids, so I can't afford to just keep them at home. I'll go crazy, right? So again, here there's an availability heuristic. And what is the availability heuristic? The difference between my parents, of course, this is a story, but you'll see it as well in your lives, is that my mom, she watched a lot of TV. She watched a lot of news, right? And it was the Berlusconi era, and he was owning all the media channels, and there was a lot of information about people being murdered, women being attacked by their husbands, children being kidnapped, etc. So the availability heuristic that my mother was applying there was, extrapolating that to the real situation. So what the availability heuristic does is, it when asked with a question on probabilities, how likely is it that my child would be kidnapped in this case, yeah? It's a difficult question, right? We are not statisticians, we don't know the real statistics, right? So we need to somehow find a heuristic, a different way of answering this question. And so one way, which is quite intuitive, and we all do that, is the availability heuristic. What that means is, we ask ourselves, well, how easy is it to find examples of stories of people having suffered from crime, being kidnapped, being aggressed, etc. If these stories are easy to recall, then we're quite likely to believe that the incidences are high. Yeah? There are many other examples. Hollywood divorce rates, right? If you ask people what are Hollywood divorce rates, for people who follow Hollywood, we might think they're pretty high. Why? Because every time there's a divorce, every time Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie have a fight, it's in the media and it's huge, right? And thank God I'm not in Hollywood. They divorce so much, must be a horrible life, yeah, despite all their wealth. So again, that's the availability heuristic. And I want to take an example that is quite striking in Germany. It's probably not as striking in Ukraine, but you might have that, is that since the last 3 years approximately, the refugee crisis has gone in the media ever since our chancellor said the borders are open for a while. Yeah, and so what happened is that the media was flooded with information about migration, about refugees, etc. And these were the kind of pictures we were seeing, right? Hordes of people, men, young men usually, somehow seeming to be flooding the country. Yeah, I mean, these were words which were being as well used: flooding the country, young men, etc. Right? So if you read your journal in the morning at 10, like a Sunday morning at 10 a.m., your children are playing and you're reading that, yeah, having a good time, and you read these things and you read it regularly, and you might hear it on radio, or you hear on radio that a refugee has killed somebody now who happened to be a German, which is things which came up in the media lately twice, right? So how is that going to offense your view on refugees, on migration? How will that change your view on how dangerous a certain population is? How much they pose a threat to our safety? And well, what I want to say here is that the availability heuristic, it estimates frequencies, yeah, and likelihood. How likely is it that a refugee has a higher crime rate than a German person? And when answering this question, we really cannot answer this fairly. We don't know. We don't have the statistics. We would have to apply a lot of system two thinking and talking to statisticians, reading reports, etc. But what we do is we follow system one, we follow our availability heuristic, and might therefore be quite wrong, and might therefore be prone to fears which are unfounded. Yeah. All right, this is this, and so we have 3 more here to go. Another one, which is one of my favorite, is what you see is all there is. Yeah. So this is the information that you might have, and this is the wrong thing is what's really happening in the world, right? So what it says is that system one is not interested in the quality and quantity of the information we have. Yeah. So let's say again, I'd like to hire someone, and I hear this person has worked for McKinsey and has studied in Harvard, right? So then I'll be, okay, probably a good person, right? System one. But this is what I might know, plus the CV, yeah? But what is really happening, like what is all the information I do not know? We often don't ask for that, right? How is the person in everyday relationships with work? Is this person reliable? Is it trustworthy, etc.? We very much focus on what we see is all there is. And that, again, is important because we can't always go and research and understand we might be quite annoying, actually, if we would always ask, what do you mean this information is reliable, etc. Yeah? So it's a necessity, but very often we can be wrong, right? So take an example of very often we hear studies, right? A study of 30%, no, a study of, let's say, of 100 people said that the Germans are quite right-wing or quite left-wing or whatever, yeah? Then be, oh my God, they're quite right-wing, yeah? But how often do we stop and challenge the quality of the study? Who did the study? What was the sample size? 100? 100 is very little. And are they reliable? Is this trustworthy? Is this a famous poll, or is it perhaps a partisan poll, right? We often don't ask this information, and we just keep the information in mind. Okay, our population is right-wing or whatever. Again, because it's simpler, and stopping to reflect and assess can be quite annoying and tiring, yeah? So that's another one. And last cognitive bias I want to present is the framing effect, which is quite funny actually. Yeah? Imagine you are at the doctor's place and the doctor would be, sir, if you go without treatment, well, I have good news. The chances of survival are 90% after 1 month of surgery. Would you like to do it? So, okay, yeah, sounds pretty cool. Yeah, I might think about it. Imagine now the doctor says, sir, we have good news. The mortality rate is 10% 1 month after surgery, right? It's the same information basically, but the focus on mortality will make us crouching. 10%. Oh, so I mean, 10 people like me would die out of 100. I prefer not to. Whereas 90% 1 month will survive. It's different frame, so we tend to interpret it differently. But the funny thing, it's the same information, right? So we can be tricked quite easily, or we can trick ourselves, which can be a nice thing to do every now and then as well, right? So this is this, and so the question that remains at the end is, okay, so what now? What do we conclude from this? Yeah. And I think there are several things that we conclude from this. Is one, for the more philosophical and intellectually oriented people among you, is that we are not the rational agents that economists often propose us to be. Yeah, there's a lot of choice which is not necessarily rational, which is more intuitive led, which is more impression led, and that might be a good thing. Yeah. The second point to keep in mind, I think, is the two systems we have. And try and analyze whenever you behave, yeah, is it system 1 which is active, or is it system 2 which is active, yeah? And realize that there's importance of both systems active. I wouldn't say system 2 is superior, but system 1 is the driving force, yeah? And very often we find ourselves in a situation where we might be tired, or our minds might be lazy, and we might not be thinking, and therefore we might do errors in judgment and choice, which could be problematic. And the last thing is, if you find this interesting, start observing cognitive biases in your friends, in your colleagues, in your family members. It's much more fun to observe them in the others than in oneself. But one tends to be more honest about the others than about oneself, yeah, and see that. And I think that's the power of these, of thinking about these cognitive biases, that you would be able to recognize situations more easily in which cognitive biases can happen. And you may be, wait a minute, have we asked the right question? Do we have all the information we need? Wait, let's make the decision tomorrow because now I'm quite tired, etc. Right? That's an important key lesson. And so that when you come into situations where the stakes are high, when it's when money questions are large, or when a question of high responsibility, that you are aware of cognitive biases that could happen, and to make a double check on you and the others whether there might be some or not. That's it. Wonderful. So I have the honor and privilege to have a conversation with you. Any remarks, critics, questions, thoughts? Please, Matt.
It was a wonderful talk, Nicholas. But I want to defend erudite thinking. You said that system 2 is lazy and gets depleted. Another way of saying it, or saying something different, is that the capacity for it is limited. The capacity for system 2 is limited. Mm-hmm. The capacity for rational reflection is limited. And that's why you need system 1, so you can reserve the capacity of system 2 for the really important things. Now, you said, so lecturers should keep it simple. But this capacity for rational thought, system 2, is not fixed. It has to be developed. And it has to be exercised to be developed. So if all lecturers and all teachers emphasize the simplicity because that's agreeable, the capacity for system 2 would decline and our society would become increasingly superficial.
Yeah, I fully agree. That makes...
Can I agree and disagree simultaneously? I think the capacity to communicate is an incredible skill and requires intense thinking and being able to define things in sharp, simple terms is very important. And I want to make the distinction between narrative communication and iconic communication. Narrative communication is step by step. It takes time to think it through and you understand it through time. But the capacity to think iconically, which is to encapsulate the essence of an argument in a phrase that either generates a provocation or some thought, is really a skill that the academic world needs to learn, for example. And I'm very concerned about that. My son was CEO of a large organization which is called The Conversation, which takes academic knowledge and then with 20 journalists with the academic tries to get them to explain what they're doing. It is not about dumbing down, it's about clarity. And that does require thought. I'll just give you a stupid example. When I first wrote The Creative City, it was 300 pages. I then 10 years later, wrote it again, and it was 50 pages. But it was the same content. So I'm agreeing and disagreeing with you.
So maybe the point of agreement here is to make things as complex as necessary and as simple as possible. Yeah? Thanks for the remarks, please.
My question would be probably also getting some tips from you on how to ensure we are free from analysis paralysis at one hand, when we just always thinking how it can go, where can we be fooled by all these factors, and still don't jump too fast to conclusions. So maybe what tips do you use in decision making?
Okay, so
still getting things done, but not yet.
Yeah. So thank you for the question. So my answer would be to acknowledge the importance of a leap of faith. Right? The leap of faith, I think, is crucial here. Faith. Yeah. Faith being an extremely important concept in religions, for instance, right? It's faith that makes the core essence of religious belief. Yeah? And if we take that to a thought process which is free from religion, I think the concept still stays. To believe in the decision, yeah, and to have a leap of faith, knowing that you might be wrong, but saying it's okay, because I need the capacity to act and to be wrong in order that it will be possible to get things done.
Переведіть, бо я буду по-українськи, щоб зрозуміли мене. Ну, перше, чи в Італії викладають основи психології? Ото, що ви розповідаєте, катастрофа української освіти. Психологія в школах не викладається. Так само і в вузах психологія не викладається. Якщо не викладається психологія, людину не може зрозуміти апріорі в принципі. Дякую вам за відповідь.
Well, it's not a formal teaching subject, but I guess that the interactions between the boys and girls teach a lot about psychology. Yeah, but there is no formal, not that I know of any formal teaching there. So we'll have that later.
У мене запитання, чи є дослідження, які показують вплив відсутності безпеки, яке було характерне для нашої країни протягом довгих років в 20-му сторіччі, чи може це змінювати і там, подавляти систему 2 і тримати людину в системі 1, відповідно погіршуючи якість прийняття рішень? Дякую.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. It's very interesting. I haven't thought about that, so my thoughts now would be done on the feet. I think yes. I think that fear I would say fear inhibits system 2, right? In fact, fear is a political strategy of demagogy. The more you fear, the more you're willing to follow. right, and not the think. So I would say yes, a long history of fear can influence the psychological outset of how you see the world, right? And I'll go even further in the thinking that it can be even transmitted in generations, right? So if we have been, if we lived in an oppressive society over generations, yeah. Take the Polish, because my wife is Polish, right? If they've been living in the Second World War, the Germans here and the Europeans here, always dominated for a long time, dominated by a stronger force. Yeah. Now the European Union comes and tells them what they shall do in a refugee crisis. Yeah. What I perceived is a strong System 1 reaction, saying, "Hey, wait a minute. Now we're free. Now you're telling us what to do. What the hell?" Yeah. And the Germans say, "What? Why are you reacting like this? You got issues?" So I think there is this indeed, that a strong past of totalitarianism or a strong past of fear will cloud your thinking, and is something that certain people in power are very much aware of and capable to use to their own advantage.